There is a question I never thought I would have to answer, and now I think about it almost every day. Can a person betray you completely without ever once touching anyone else? For 32 years, I would have said no. I would have said that infidelity is a physical thing, a body in the wrong bed, and that anything short of that is just life, just the ordinary drift of two people. I do not believe that anymore. I learned, at 57, sitting at my husband's desk with his journal open in my hands, that the deepest part of a marriage is not the body at all, and that you can have all of someone's body and almost none of the thing that actually matters, and that you can lose that thing to a person your husband has never so much as held hands with. My name is Eleanor. I am 57 years old, and I own a small independent bookshop in Northampton, Massachusetts, the kind with creaking floors and too many chairs, and a cat the regulars are fonder of than they are of me. I have spent my whole life among words. I know the difference, better than most, between language that informs and language that reveals, between being spoken to and being truly spoken with. I tell you this because it is the exact knife this story turned on, and because a woman who has spent 40 years reading should perhaps have noticed sooner that her own marriage had quietly stopped saying anything real. My husband is David. We have been married 32 years. We raised 2 children who are grown and gone and good, and we built a steady life, and I would have told you that autumn that we were fine. Not passionate. You are not passionate at 32 years, or we were not, but fine. Comfortable. We moved around each other in our house like 2 people who know all the choreography, the coffee, the locking up, the who takes the trash, the small logistics that fill a long marriage. We talked all the time. That is the thing I have had to sit with. We talked constantly. About the children, about the bookshop, about his work, about the gutters and the taxes, and what to have for dinner. What I did not notice, because the talking never stopped, was that somewhere in the last decade we had quietly traded every real conversation for 1,000 logistical ones, and that I had not asked my husband what he was actually afraid of, or what he dreamed about, or how he felt about getting old, in longer than I could remember. We had become, without either of us deciding it, the management team of a household instead of the 2 people who had once stayed up until 3 in the morning saying everything. I can still see those early years so clearly, which is part of what makes the rest so hard. When we were young, we could not stop talking. We talked through whole nights, on the floor of our first terrible apartment, about God and our parents, and what we were afraid of, and what we wanted our lives to mean. I knew the inside of that man the way I knew my own hands. And it is not that any single conversation ever ended. It is that they thinned, gradually, the way hair thins, so slowly you can never point to the day. The children came, and the talk became about the children. The bookshop came, and the talk became about money. We got good at the logistics, dangerously good, and the logistics are seductive, because they feel like communication. You are exchanging words all day long, you are a smooth-running team, and so neither of us noticed that we had not actually told each other anything true in years. We thought we were close, because we were never apart. We had confused proximity with intimacy. They are not the same thing, and a marriage can quietly die of the difference without a single voice ever being raised. David keeps a journal. He always has, all his life, these black, hardcover notebooks he writes in at his desk in the evenings, and in 32 years I had never read one, because it was his, and because some things you simply do not do. I want that on the record. I was not a snoop. I had never once opened one of those notebooks. What happened was utterly ordinary. We needed an address. An old friend of ours had died, and the funeral was out of state, and David thought he had written the family's address in the back of his current journal months before. He was at his evening choir rehearsal. David had taken up singing with a community chorus a couple of years earlier, which I had been glad of. A man needs something of his own. He had told me on his way out the door to grab the address from his journal if I needed it before he was home. So, I had permission. That is almost the cruelest part. He sent me into that book himself, never imagining, I think, that I would do anything but flip to the back. But a journal is not a filing cabinet. You open it looking for an address and your eye, the traitor, catches a word. And the word my eye caught, near the middle, written in my husband's familiar hand, was a name. Claire. And underneath it, a sentence that stopped my breath. I told Claire about my father today, the real thing, the thing I have never been able to say out loud to anyone, and she just held it, and for the first time in years, I felt like a person and not a function. I sat down in his chair. I did not go to the back for the address. I read. I read for an hour, maybe more. I lost the sense of time the way you do in a nightmare. I went forward through the entries, and then I went back, hunting, the way you press on a bruise to find its edges. And the strange thing, the thing I have not told many people, is how beautifully he wrote in there. David is not a writer. His texts to me are 3 words and a typo, but in that notebook, writing to himself, writing around Claire, he was eloquent, he was tender. He was alive on the page in a way I had not seen him be alive in our kitchen in a decade. And that somehow was its own separate wound, underneath the first one. It was not only that he had an inner life I had lost access to, it was that the inner life was rich and full and lovely and going on the entire time in the next room every evening while I sat in our den believing we were 2 contented people who had simply run out of things to say. We had not run out. He had a flood of things to say. He had just stopped saying any of them to me. There were months of it. Claire was a woman from his chorus, and I want to be precise about what I found and what I did not find because the precision is the whole point. I did not find a physical affair. There was no hotel, no touch, no body in the wrong bed. David, I would come to believe, was telling the truth when he later swore that nothing physical had ever happened, that he had never even held her hand. What I found was so much worse, and it took me reading half that notebook to understand why it was worse. I found my husband's whole inner life handed to another woman. Every fear he had stopped telling me, every tender, uncertain 3 a.m. thought, his grief about his father, which I had watched him swallow silently for 2 decades and had stopped, God forgive me, trying to reach, his fears about aging, about whether his life had meant anything, about us. There were entries about us, about how he felt invisible in our marriage, how he and I only ever talked logistics anymore, how he had forgotten the last time I asked him a real question. And next to all of it, again and again, was Claire. Claire understood. Claire asked him things no one had asked him in years. Claire made him feel known. He used that word over and over, known. And every time I read it, it went into me like a thin blade, because it was the exact word for the exact thing I had stopped giving him, and that he had stopped giving me, and that he had gone and found in a chorus on a Tuesday night. I have tried to explain to people why this devastated me more than a physical affair would have, and some of them understand instantly, and some of them never will. Here is the closest I can come. A body is a thing you can share almost carelessly. People have affairs of the body out of boredom, out of opportunity, out of a bad weekend, and as terrible as that is, it can mean almost nothing. But your inner life, your fears, your father, your 3 a.m. self, that you only hand to someone you have let all the way in, that is the actual marriage. That is the thing the vows are really about, underneath the part about the body. And my husband had taken the deepest, truest, most private part of himself, the part that was supposed to be mine, the part I had assumed was still mine simply because no one else was sleeping in our bed, and he had quietly been giving it, night after night, to a woman named Claire. I had his body, and his mornings, and his half of the mortgage. She had his heart's actual voice, and I had not even known I had lost it, because the logistics never stopped, because we talked all the time, because the surface of our marriage looked exactly the way it always had. I want to try to name the specific flavor of that betrayal for anyone who has tasted it and been told they were overreacting, because I was told that later by people who meant well. They would say, "But he didn't do anything," as though doing meant only one thing. Here is what he did. For 2 years, when something moved him, when he was afraid, when he remembered his father, when he had a thought too tender to say in daylight, my husband's instinct, the deep automatic reach of his heart, turned away from me and toward her. That is the betrayal, not an act, a direction. His heart had quietly repointed itself, the way a compass repoints, and every needle flicker of his real self now swung toward a woman in a chorus instead of the woman he had married. You cannot photograph that. There is no hotel receipt for it, but it is the truest infidelity there is, because it is the betrayal of the exact thing the marriage was for. I was still sitting in his chair, with the notebook closed in my lap, when David came home from chorus. I am not going to give you the whole of that night. Some of it is too much hours and too raw still, but I will tell you the shape of it, and I will tell you the one thing he said that mattered most, because it is the thing that taught me what I most need you to hear. When he saw the journal in my lap, he went white, and then, and this is the moment, the very first thing out of his mouth before any apology was, "Eleanor, nothing happened. We never even touched. I swear to you, nothing ever happened." And I looked at my husband of 32 years, and I understood in that sentence the entire size of the gulf between us. Because he genuinely believed that the touching was the line. He genuinely believed that as long as no bodies had met, he had kept faith with me. That the months of handing his secret heart to another woman were, what? A friendship? A technicality? Nothing. He thought the thing he had given Claire was nothing because it had no body attached, and I had to say to him, in the quietest, hardest voice I have ever used, "David, I would have been less betrayed if you had slept with her and told me nothing. You gave her the part of you I thought I was still married to. The bodies are not the marriage. This," I held up the notebook, "this is the marriage, and you gave it away, and you did not even know you were doing it, which is somehow the worst part of all." He cried when I said that. Not the cornered crying of a man caught, though there was some of that too. This was something else, something that frightened me more, because it was the crying of a man realizing the size of a thing only as it is named for him. I watched it land on him in real time, that the friendship he had filed under harmless, the thing he had told himself was just talking, just a kindred spirit, just the one place he felt like a person, was in fact the slow giving away of his marriage, and that he had done it in good conscience, which is the most dangerous way anything is ever done. People who know they are betraying you at least know what they are doing. David had betrayed me while believing himself faithful, and that meant the rot went deeper and quieter than any affair of the body, and we were both going to have to dig all the way down to it if we wanted to save anything at all. Now, I have to do the hard, fair thing now, the thing this channel is for, because a story that made David the only guilty party would be a lie, and I have promised myself I will not tell those anymore, not even the ones that flatter me. I had stopped asking. That is the truth I had to hold, in the days after, alongside my fury, and it did not cancel my fury, but it sat right next to it. Somewhere in the long middle of our marriage, I had stopped asking my husband real questions. I had let the logistics swallow us just as much as he had. When he went quiet about his father, I had been relieved, on some level, not to have to wade into that grief, and I had let him swallow it alone for 20 years. I had treated his inner life as settled, finished, known, when the truth is that a person is never finished, and a marriage that stops being curious about the other person is a marriage that has quietly hung a vacancy sign in the window. I did not hang the sign for Claire, but I helped let the lights go dark in those rooms, years before she ever walked past and found one of them lit and warm and empty and waiting. He committed the betrayal, but I had helped build the silence that the betrayal grew in, and I was not going to pretend otherwise, because pretending otherwise would have guaranteed it happened again, with some other Claire, in some other quiet. So, we made a decision that surprised everyone who knew, including, on some days, me. We decided to try. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds, and I know there are people who will say I should have walked out, and for a physical affair, for a different marriage, for a different woman, maybe that would be right. I do not judge the ones who leave. But here is what made the difference for me. When David finally understood, and it took him days, it did not come all at once, when he finally understood that what he had given away was the actual marriage and not some harmless friendship, he did not minimize it again. He broke. He ended it with Claire completely, in front of me, that week. He left the chorus. He started seeing someone, alone, and then with me, to understand why he had needed so badly to be known and had reached for a stranger instead of his wife. And, hardest of all, he started talking to me again. Really talking, the 3 in the morning kind, the kind we had not done in 15 years, and it was awkward and rusty and sometimes unbearable, 2 late middle-aged people learning to say true things to each other again, like teenagers. The talking is the strangest part, and the part I hold on to. We started small, because we had to. You cannot leap from 15 years of logistics straight back into your whole soul. He told me, one night, washing dishes, a small true thing about his day, the actual feeling of it, and not the report of it, and I felt my chest go tight with how long it had been. I made myself tell him a true thing back. We are doing it on purpose now, clumsily, like a physical therapy for a part of the marriage that had atrophied. Some nights it flows, and we catch a glimpse of the 2 people on the apartment floor at 3 in the morning, 30 years ago. And some nights it is wooden and sad, and we give up and go to bed. But we keep doing it, because I understand now what I did not understand at 56, that intimacy is not a state you achieve once and then own. It is a practice you keep doing, or stop doing, every single day, for as long as you both shall live. We stopped. We are trying now to start again. We are not healed. I will not stand here and tell you we are, because I do not know yet, and anyone who wraps a thing like this up with a bow is selling something. There are nights it still rises up in me, and I have to leave the room. There are mornings I look at him and see the notebook. Trust does not grow back the way it broke, all at once. It comes back, if it comes back at all, the way a forest comes back after a fire, slowly, from the edges, with no guarantees. But we are talking. The silence that made the whole thing possible has been broken, and we are both, every day, choosing not to let it close back over us. Whether that is enough, I genuinely do not know. But it is real, which is more than our comfortable, quiet marriage had been for a long time, and I find I would rather have the hard, true thing we have now than go back to the pleasant, empty thing we had before Claire. If you are in a marriage that talks all the time and never says anything, if you have quietly traded every real conversation for 1,000 logistical ones and called it being settled, then this story is for you. One word in the comments if it found you. Known. Just that. It is for the intimacy that leaves a marriage long before any third person arrives, for the rooms where the lights have gone dark while the surface stayed bright, and for anyone who has just felt the cold little question of when, exactly, they last truly asked the person beside them how they were. Subscribe for new stories, real patterns, full narratives, the long game. 2 small pieces of wisdom from this one before I go. The first. An affair almost never begins where you think it begins. It does not begin in a bed or even in a longing for a particular person. It begins, most of the time, in all the conversations a marriage quietly stopped having, in the question you stopped asking, the grief you let your partner swallow alone, the slow decade in which 2 people who used to say everything became 2 people who only discuss the logistics. The body is the last thing to leave a marriage, and often it never leaves at all. The heart leaves first, out a door that the silence propped open. If you want to protect what you have, do not just guard the bedroom. Guard the conversation. Keep asking the person you love the real questions, the ones with no logistics in them, for as long as you both shall live. The second. If you ever find yourself, as my David did, feeling unknown in your own marriage, invisible, reduced to a function, hungry to be truly seen, understand that the answer is a door, and there are 2 of them, and they lead to opposite places. One door is the hard one. You turn back toward the person you promised, and you say the true, vulnerable, frightening thing to them, even though the silence between you has grown so thick it feels impossible. The other door is the easy one, the one that just happens to open, the chorus, the coworker, the stranger who asks you a real question at the right lonely moment. They feel, in the moment, like the same thing. Both of them just feel like finally being known. They are not the same thing. One of them rebuilds your life, and the other one quietly hands it to someone else. Choose the hard door. It is the only one that leads back home. An affair rarely begins in a bed. It begins in all the conversations a marriage quietly stopped having. So keep talking to the person you love. The silence is the door. I'll see you next time.